Hey guys, welcome back. Mark here, and I'm going to try to do a better job of keeping this video to about 15 minutes today. So if you remember where we left off in lesson 2, we added more things to our window. So we added some static text, we added a background color, and then we went through and we removed the edit menu that is added by our text editor control. By adding that control to our windows, we use the style bit to remove the horizontal scroll bar, and then we use these functions to actually remove edit from the menu. So this is where we left off. So we have this nice little setup. So what I figured we'd do today is let's go ahead and we're going to add the rest of our global variables. So we're going to have quite a few, and I'm going to actually have 2 lines of global variables because I don't like a very long extended line. I just find that cluttering to me, but we already have our version as a global variable. And so we're going to have D4 count. So that's actually how many 4-sided dice we're going to have. And we're going to have D4 total. So the total of 4-sided dice. And you'll see as we use these later on. So we got D4 count, D4 total. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have this all the way up to 100 sided die. So we're going to do a D6, not D5, D6, geez, count, D6 total, and then a D8 count, D8 total. Now these are standard dice types or die types for role-playing games. D10 count, and then we'll do our D10 total, and then what we'll do is, like I said, I don't like having these go all the way across. We'll start our D12 count, and then we'll do our D12 total, not Torah, total, jeez. And then we're going to do our D20 count, and then our D20 total, and then our last die that we're going to do is our 100-sided die. So that'll be our D100, that'll be count, and then our D100 total. So those are all of our variables. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to finish initializing these variables. Now, we want to make sure that they actually have the data that we need to start with, or no garbage data in there. So our D4 count, we're actually going to have that equal to 1. Then we're going to use our colon, and then our D4 total is going to equal to 0. Now we're going to do this right down the line. So we're going to have D4 all the way to D100. So by the magic of pausing and unpausing, I'm going to have all this added for us. And there we go, in a blink of an eye, we have our variables initialized. So D4 count, D4 total, all the way up to D100 count and D100 total. So our variables are initialized for us, so we don't have any garbage data. And so the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is, if you remember in the last lesson, we added this static text control. Now, if you look at it, I can click on it, and I can actually type in here. It's a text editor. Well, I don't want us to be able to type in there, because what we're going to do is we're going to push out to it a bunch of information. And so because we're pushing out a bunch of information, I want to disable the text editor. So right below bold here, and what we'll do is we'll put a space just for clarity. and we're going to do the handle to our window, so DR, and this is going to be our T edit out. If you remember, that's our text editor. I forgot the period, excuse me. So dot T edit out, comma, and then we're going to go ahead and disable it. And what that allows us to do is disable any input into the text editor. Because we're only going to use a couple lines of it. We're going to push some data into it. We don't want anyone being able to type in here and change the data. It's not going to do anything. It makes no sense. But we'll disable it so we can use it as basically our output window. And that's what we're going to go ahead and do with it. So the next thing we're going to need to go ahead and do is we need some more controls on the window, right? So we need basically text boxes for our dice type, or a static indicator of some kind, the number of dice, we need the modifier, and then we need a text box for the result. Now there's a couple things that I want to talk about with this. So the first thing is we're going to use a bitmap button, and I'm going to zoom in on this bad boy all the way up to 800%. So this is a bitmap that I drew. It's 15 by 15 pixels, and basically I just kind of said, okay, how do I make an up, down, left, right arrow? So, and then I just took this and I selected the whole thing. I did a Control A or select all, and I flipped it so now it's a right arrow or a left arrow and an up or a down arrow. So I rotated it. I used the same image to get all 4 arrows if I needed them. And so if we look here, and don't mind the die, that was something else I was working on. So we have a down, left, right, and up BMP. And so these are actually in the folder that where we're working on this dice roller. So these are our images. So as you can see, if we look, I have an images folder, and that's where I put these images for our dice rollers. These are our bitmap buttons. So I've already built this, so we have it. If you guys are looking for it, please don't go hesitate to reach out, or just make your own. Make your own bitmaps really quick for these buttons. But we're going to go ahead in the first die that we're going to go ahead and start coding, and we're going to do that right below our static text, is our 4-sided die. So 4-sided dice, I'll call it. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a bunch of controls. There's probably 8 to 9 controls for each thing. And so we're going to just go right down through. So one of the controls is going to be static text. So static text. And then this is going to be the handle to our window. So DR, and then we're going to call this ST, and then I actually call it D41. So static text, 4-sided die, or D41. And then it's going to be D4 for our text. And then we're actually going to position this at 45, 40, 25, 25. So let's just go ahead and see what that adds for us. Save, run. So we got our dice type D4 right here. And we're going to do that basically for all of our dice. So 4-sided die, 6-sided, 8-sided, 10, 12, 20, and 100-sided die. So we'll have our die type static text. But let's go ahead and just build our 4-sided die right across here. All the controls that we need. So the next control that we're going to need is a text box. So we have our text boxed, and then basically once again window to our handle, and we're going to call this TBD4. And you guys can see I stuck with a theme with everything here. So text box D4. Remember, upper and lower case actually does matter. And so we're going to position this at 140, then 40, 40, and 25. So let's go ahead and look at this text box. And we'll look at each control as we add it. So now that we've added this control, you can see that we can click in here for number of dice. We're actually not going to allow that. We're actually going to use up and down arrows because we're going to use our bitmaps for that, and we'll look at that here in a second. Because that's the next thing we're going to add. So the next control is going to be Bitmap Button. And so this will be the DR. And then we're going to be button, BTN, D4, and then this will be up. So this is our up button, and then we have to give it our location. So in our folder, it's an images, backslash, what's that, uppercase up dot BMP. So that's our bitmap image. And then this is where we're going to have our handlers. So we actually have a BMP button event handler, and we haven't added that yet, but we will. And then we're going to put this in the upper left corner at 185, 45. So let's go ahead and look at that. We can run that. And I'm not going to click on it because we haven't actually wired up the event handler yet, so we'll get an error. I don't want to do that yet. It'll say that it's missing. So, but you can see we're just adding more control as we build it across. Like I said, I want to keep this video about 15 minutes today, so I'm going to kind of run through a little bit quicker. DR, and this is going to be our down button. So BTN, this is just a handle, and we're going to call it D4, and then lowercase dns for down. Once again, it's going to be in images, backslash, and then it's going to be called down.bmp. Then once again, this is going to be our bitmap button event handler, which we're going to set up in our next video. We'll actually build that out. So we'll say 202. This will be at 45. So now I'm going to save this and run it so we can see it. So now we have our up and down arrows. So now we need our modifier controls and our result. So our next control is going to be another text box. As long as I can spell right. Text box, the handle to our window, DR. Dot, this is going to be TB. So text box, D4. So our four-sided die. And this text box is going to be called mod. So our modifier. So some dice rolls have a modifier to them, like I was explaining. It might have been earlier in the previous lesson, but that modifier can be added or subtracted from our roll. So we're going to go ahead and make sure we have a text box for that modifier. And we're going to let the user actually punch that in. And then we're going to actually have our checkbox event handler. So checkbox and the handle to our window. And this is going to be CB, which stands for checkbox. And I'm going to call it D for positive. So if it's a, positive or being added, basically, I should say, instead of positive, being added to our roll. So if it's positive, and then we're actually going to give it this with /. Yeah, that'll start there. That's perfect. I just had to check it really quick. And then this actually has two event handlers. It actually has the check box, actually the lowercase b, checkbox, set event handler, And then the second one is going to be the checkbox reset event handler. So this one actually has two event handlers. If you check it or if you reset it, which is when you uncheck it. So you have two event handlers to handle this for checkboxes. And so we're going to set this at 290 40 40 25 40 40 25. There we go. Like I said, I have the locations for this stuff, so it's kind of nice that I've built this before. So here's our checkbox. So positive. Now we just need to actually build in our negative checkbox really quick. So let's go ahead and do that as well. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep this a little bit shorter. I've already over 15 minutes, so looks like we might go 20 minutes today. So checkbox, DR, whoop, make sure we get uppercase. And it's going to be checkbox D4, and this one's going to be negative. So this is our negative checkbox, and so this should be just our subtract. That should be all we need there. It's going to add it right on the other side for us. But then we need the same event handlers. So our checkbox set event handler and our checkbox reset event handler, and then this is going to be 335, and then it's still going to be down 40, and then it's going to be 30 wide by 25 high. So now we have our negative added. There's our negative checkbox right on the other side of it. So it doesn't look too bad. Did I hit the... And just let me... 335... 40... Yep. So that'll be positive or negative. So here's positive. There's our negative. And it's going to allow us to run with it. Alright, so next is going to go ahead and be a button. So we got two more controls to add, a button and a text box. So this button, oh, I don't want to do uppercase. I try to keep consistent. So button, and this button is going to be BTN, and it's going to be called roll D4. So this is going to generate the roll. And so roll, this is basically rolling the dice, creating all the random numbers that we need. And this is going to be a button event handler. So when we call it, it's going to be in the upper left, 385, 40, 75, 25. And then we're going to go ahead and add our last text box really quick so we can look at it. Text box. And this one's going to be our TBD. Text box D4, and then we're going to call it result. And this is going to be 500, 40, 75, 25. So let's go ahead and save this, run it. And here you guys can see we have it positive or negative. I'm not going to click on those controls because it'll get pretty angry just because I haven't built the event handler, so we'll get an error. But what we can go ahead and do really quick is actually disable the number of dice control and the result control. And so we're going to go ahead and do that really quick. And that'll be the end of this lesson. So right underneath our text edit disable, we're going to have our handle to our window, and we're going to look at that control. So TB D4, so that's our text box D4. We're going to disable, and don't forget the exclamation mark because you're sending a control or a command to the window. disable that control. And then the same thing with dr dot, this is gonna be our tbd4 result, and we're gonna disable that as well. So I'm gonna save this, we'll run it, and now you can see I can't click here and I can't click in result. I can click in here, I could click these, but like I said, the button and our positive negative, we have not coded the event handlers in yet, so we'll get an error. But that concludes lesson 3. We've added the first line of controls. In the next lesson, we'll go through and add the rest of our controls across here for everything, and we'll continue building our program. So I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. If you did, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and if you don't forget to subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, please don't forget to leave me feedback. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next lesson.